This is Decentral Lens, distilling the crypto news you need to know and why.
All right. Hello, everybody. Oh, boy, Disco. Oh, boy. That's all I got for you. That's my intro. Oh,
Yeah,
boy.
I know. I like it, and it's time to take a moment. It's time to have the oh boy moment, and wow, yeah, wow. It's like I don't know. We just have. I guess we're in a new. I've never experienced really the side of being a holder in a post all-time high environment. So I'm relishing that feeling, and God, it really has a lot of different. It's got a lot of different ways that it hits, but it's what a difference a week makes.
Oh, man. It's, yeah. And, it's just cool because, like, we've been doing this as old friends for a year. And we've been talking about it. And, you just said something that we could gloss over, we could hone in on. You just said, like, you said something like, I waited and then I made it. Like, you got in at the last peak all-time high. You didn't buy all your stuff at an all-time high, but you got in 21 or whatever year that was. And what was Bitcoin at? What did it peak at then? 67?
Yeah, I was buying like 65, 64, 66 was when I started, and
Okay.
I was getting ETH, 4-ish or more. And then the crazy thing is, and then remember that really weird band name, like, and you will know us by the Trail of the Dead or whatever's out there. And it's like, for me, they're a crazy Texas band. They're really good. But my point is, like, I don't even think about all of the, real dumb ones I bought at all-time highs when I was just like super FOMO'd and knew absolutely nothing. I was like, David Hoffman mentioned da-da-da, I better pick a stack up. And I'm sitting there like, just floundering, operating from complete, like basically no base thesis was going on there. It was just panic FOMO, get in and buy everything. And if they mention it, make sure you have a play. I had this stupid theory that, like, if something got airdropped, then that was the time for me to find a way to buy it. It's like I had no understanding.
You weren't alone, Disco. You weren't alone. Yeah, and I guess for our audience, before we're just into having our jaws dropping and mind blowing, Bitcoin has reached a new all-time high. I believe it peaked at 93, Disco, or 94. Now we're back to the lows of the 10 o'clock in the morning bear of 92.5, but like we are over 90,000. We blew through the 80,000s, right? Because our previous all-time high was 76, 75, and we
76-ish.
Yeah. And then we just, in the last couple days, it's funny, once you go to FOMO, to the moon euphoria, days and times, you're like, it's been a bull forever, dude. Like, I am the smartest human being in the planet. All of us think we are geniuses. Are we? I think we're pretty smart. Like, if you're sitting listening to this show, if you're listening to something as nuanced as this show, you made it. You won. Congratulations. Do I have an emoji? Hold on. I have these new sticks, Disco, and I got to find the right one. Like, I don't know. My daughter made fun of
all of them.
My daughter made it's like, look, we won. We're children again. We're my crayons. But Bitcoin's at 92,000. I mean, what else is there to say?
Well, I kind of have this feeling of, kind of like, hey, I'm going to I deserve to pat myself on the back. It's like, yes, maybe I'll order that piece of pie at the end of the meal because, hey, we made it, maybe I will stay up a little later because F it, it's here, so there's just such a weight, kind of off the shoulders and just kind of that validation. And I do feel, and this, I wanted to get your feeling on it because I haven't been through this before, but like, I almost felt like there should be more like public ticker taping of the accomplishment. You know what I mean? It's weird. Like, I feel like there should be more like mass euphoria about it, but then you got to understand that it's really for the people that that kind of, stuck their neck out a little bit over this last period of time and got in and held through. I've gotten a couple kind of, not necessarily congratulatory calls, but I've had a couple check-ins like, wow, looks like Bitcoin's really doing well now. And, and I appreciate
but go
those,
to a little
like,
more detail. It's interesting because you were still, you came in the height of the last cycle. You were the one of the 99%. And obviously all our listeners here are, maybe some are earlier cyclers too. I know we have a lot of like influential people and smart thinking people who follow our show. You were the one that kind of figured that out. We don't get the bag pump crowd. We get like the thoughtful builder, like smart trader, like what's really going on, like be candid, independent media crowd. So try and say that twice because I couldn't. But it's interesting, like to slow everything down, you stayed with it. So 99% of the people didn't, and everyone here stayed with it. Like we won. Like pretty fair to say, like we won. Heart, we won, right? But you were still kind of like in this last year as your thesis and your research and what you knew kind of hardened as Bitcoin is like kind of the world reserve currency and why it's so important to uproot the legacy fiat and banking system. You were still getting flack from not flack. That's not a fair, but like from family, loved ones. Like they were still like, I don't know, dude, like MSNBC's saying this and like, it's, and Jamie Dimon's still saying you're like, okay, how do I, so you've been fielding a lot of these. I'm this isn't a brag, but I'm so many cycles in. I just don't talk about it as much unless people really want to talk about it or are curious. I just don't even go there. But like you fielded all these, and now you're saying they're like, hey, they get their pen and paper up. You're like, any other tips? Any should I get this Cardano stuff? This looks pretty interesting. Be like, no,
Well, it's just so weird because I felt like I gave enough. Whenever I did talk to someone, I felt like I gave enough hints like, hey, dude, it's not too late. Like, hey, this is really, pretty low right now and it's got significant upswings. So I almost felt like a handful of the people I've been talking to probably, put together a little stash of their own. And I'm realizing now that no, they didn't, so it's taking that next step from being interested or hearing about it to actually, jumping in and being an owner. And once you're holder, you're part of this whole society and you're part of this whole, this movement. And I think that's the part that I want other people to be able to become involved with. I want people to be, orange pilled or crypto pilled or whatever it is and kind of go on that journey, not just, hey, your, number go up, but where else can you really invest in something that then can broaden your perspective on things? It's like, yeah, you can buy XYZ mutual fund or ETF or tech stock or whatever. But with this, you're like buying into, not necessarily change, but kind of a hope for things to become different and better.
Yeah.
And it really does graduate your day-to-day perspective and way of thinking because you're looking at how, breaking stuff and rebuilding it in a better way can change the world. And you really kind of have that. And I feel like everybody who watches, listens to the show or is involved on the, Bitcoin, Twitter or timelines and all that, everyone kind of has that shared feeling. And I think, before it used to be more like, oh, a specific community, you join an NFT community and then it's that. But I think right now it's just the entire movement, like everybody who's got to this point, like I'm calling for everyone to kind of get past the stupid BS little, little side wars and stuff and look at this bigger picture of what we've been able to accomplish. And frankly, what we should be responsible for moving forward and kind of what to be aware of despite all of this euphoria, like what should we still be keeping an eye on to make sure that some of the things that we really cherish, are still valued and come to life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to just dig into one little aspect of what you just said. Why,
Sure.
like you said, we're all celebrating together and, Bitcoin going up is so good. I guess it's good. Like, let's just pretend for 2 minutes that we've got old friends listening who are normies. Like, let's say we're going back to square one. Why, with everything you've learned in the last year, really 2, 3, or 4 years. So I shouldn't just say from our show, why do you think Bitcoin, like going up in this adoption, is so good? What makes Bitcoin so freaking important for like society?
Well, if you go back to when we first did our first handful of shows, and maybe I'll do this just to kind of timestamp it and kind of look at it
Mm-hmm.
as a gauge, but I've always been attracted to disruption. I've
Right.
always been attracted to, movements that kind of change the status quo. And that's what's always been so enticing to me is like, this is a disruptive force that can actually come in and change the way people transact, change the way wealth is generated, change the way, all these different things. And it can kind of push out some of the BS that's just been accepted as part of the system, so when you have the little, as you've talked about, like the toll taker fees on the credit cards and all that,
Right.
it's like
3% on
looking for,
everything.
yeah. So when we have a new reality where people are like, dude, I don't want to, you don't get that anymore. Like that's the
Sorry,
stuff that's
Visa.
just so
Sorry, MasterCard.
fundamentally
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all these, and you don't even call them fiefdoms, but all these different industries based around just taking a little bit of what you're doing and some of it's hidden and all that, like just the transparency. And I think that overall, I've got a ton of thoughts and questions around, how do we look at this from a more transparent society moving forward and
Yeah.
more transparent media structure and all that. So yeah, you got me hopped up on this. I could keep going and
Good.
going, but
Yeah,
I
dude. Well,
think there's,
I'll throw some of my own in too.
yeah,
Freedom.
let's go.
The reason that when I went down that rabbit hole in 2015, and the reason I'm still so bullish on Bitcoin now is the freedom to transact. Like you said, like what I think people don't realize with the banking system, what we in Bitcoin call the fiat system, is that fractional reserve banking, the banks only have to hold, I don't know what the number's always changing. It was 1/20th. I think we're at around a 10th now, which makes sense because you lend it out for businesses, for mortgages. And so it makes sense that the money would all go around. But the problem is with our taxes and everything, especially with the US government, because right now the US dollar is the world reserve currency. They're not only taxing us, but they're printing a ton of money, which basically what we save from our hard work does not stay the same value 10 years from now. That $10,000 you made, last year, this year is now worth they say it's 4% now, but let's be honest. In COVID, it was probably 20, 30%. Now it's probably 4, 5, or 6%. It's slower, but it's not 4. They're 2. They're not there. Your money, like literally anything you save, that $10,000, if it was liquid, if money was liquid and it was in a bucket, that bucket would have holes in it and it would slowly leak. So you're working hard to save your acorns over time to not only to quote unquote retire. I mean, that whole mindset is gone, but you're saving money to free yourself up to do what you love and to spend time with those who you love. And the US dollar, with all the taxation we have on it, is the one that we can see and we're all like, yeah, you got to pay your taxes. Obviously we need a military, we need social services, like for kids in need or kids who can't get meals, like that's a good for the whole country. But the problem is, like when you add wars into this, when the government spends way more than we're even giving in taxes, and we're already taxed pretty high in my opinion, then they can start wars with that. They can do things with the money that we don't necessarily agree to. And that's what's been happening. So that we've had that leaky bucket with Bitcoin, with gold historically forever. And now with Bitcoin, a digital form of gold for its first layer 0 or primary use case, you can literally make money. That $10,000 you made, if you made $10,000 last year and you put it in Bitcoin last year, and obviously we're about to enter probably the biggest super cycle we've ever seen, that you and I've been talking about for a year. That Bitcoin would now be worth, so if you put in 10,000, you probably got half Bitcoin last year because it was 20,000, right? And then now it's at, we'll just say it's 100 just for easy math. So it's 5x. So that 10,000 is now worth 50,000. So now your hard earned work, you didn't put it, the liquid in a leaky bucket. Think of, now we change the metaphor to a seed. You planted a seed in the forest and now you've got like a 2-foot sproutling tree. Make sure you put cage around it, because it is rutting season around here in Illinois, and the bucks are they like the young saplings. I don't know why they like the young ones, but now I put the cages around it. But then that tree grows and grows, and that work and that energy you put in last year is 5x this year. Let's just say when Bitcoin finally slows down and all the sovereigns and all the states and all the pension funds get it, at some point, maybe it'll only appreciate 2 or 3% a year, but it is an appreciating value asset over time as adoption goes on. So you can do less work and spend more times with loved ones. I mean, it's the most beautiful concept ever.
And one feeling that is tied to that I find very liberating and really important is, the self-custody. So like, I love knowing that I have, XYZ, hardware wallets. And I know that if I wanted to turn something around, or if something happened, like, I don't have to do anything except, log in and take care of that. And that sort of mobility and that sort of freedom, and not having that fear that I had a little bit over the last year and a half of like, okay, yeah, these banks could just clamp down or see something and shut it. But being able to have kind of, I don't want to be like, hip hop and talk about like duffel bag money, but being able to have money that you have, access to, that can't be touched or messed with unless you want to do so. Like, that gives you just a little bit more kind of swagger in your day to day. Cause it's like, dude, I can make a move right now if we need to. So I really like that part of it as well.
Yeah. And I work with people, in one of the companies I have, with people all over the world. And whenever I send money, whether it's on US soil or international soil, I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but the wording matters and language matters. And the bank, which is, last time I checked, was my money, is the money I earned, or is my company's money. And I am the head of that company and I spend it where I want. When you send a wire, it's the language is something like, thank you for submitting your transaction. We will review it. Like, really? Yeah. So freedom to transact. Like, I get we want to stop and thwart the Lazaruses of the world in North Korea. Like, there are definitely bad actors here, but for a centralized entity to assume guilt instead of innocence, like, use all your energy to focus on these groups. And if they're really bad groups for the US or for us or for the world, then use your agency to spy on them and keep track of them. But don't leave us alone. Like, back before digital currency, before everything went to credit card, and the credit card companies, they take their 3%. So the prices at the store go up. So you're paying more. So the shopkeep loses and you lose. Like, say you split it 1.5%. Visa doesn't lose. They don't care. And then they get people enslaved in debt 20 to 30%. Like, it should. There's so many aspects to it. Like, it's funny. I got you all wound up and I'm like, oh, hold on, Disco, I'm not done. Like,
let me get the mic.
Let me answer my own question for the 35th reason. But I can send money. Like, if you say to me, like, dude, I got us Giz tickets. We're going Santa Fe. Like, you owe me $250. I could send you Ethereum or Solana or Bitcoin. I could send it to you and it will be, you'll see that I sent it within 4 or 5 minutes tops. And then it will be verified with a bunch of valid, or the bunch of miners within 20, 30 minutes, like solid, can't be reversed, which they never are anyway. But it's immutable. It can't be taken back. So if you send the wrong address, like, yeah, that's scary. But this is a whole new world adoption, because Bitcoin as digital gold is not, it's just the first narrative that you introduce people to, but the freedom to transact, the fact that I can just store the seeds in my head. Like, if the country just went south, or anywhere I am went south, you can store those in your head. You don't have anything on you. You're not carrying 15 ounces of gold. Like, hope they don't notice. Like, oh yeah, that's right. Metal detectors. Gosh, so you couldn't even try and like hide it, like, tape it to your body or something. Like, Bitcoin, you can store in your brain. It's so elegant. It solves so many problems. And you and I just touched on, like, literally the base use case, and then the freedom to transact. And that's just, and the appreciation of your labor going up over time and increasing in value, instead of right now the leaky bucket decreasing in value if you just hold cash.
So one thing I've been thinking about in the last couple of days that I would love to, be a fly on the wall or figure out a way to kind of capture these conversations that I'm sure are happening. And that's like all these calls are probably flooding like the old school money managers right now with like, boomers and younger being like, dude, so how much Bitcoin do I have in there? And then being like, there's
Yeah.
just like scrambled eggs trying to figure out how to cover their asses on being dead wrong on that call, being like, no, I wouldn't touch that. That's too high. And now they're all going to get little buzzes like, hey, so yeah, how much Bitcoin do we have actually in my portfolio? Well, so I just love thinking about them having to scramble and backpedal and now hear them spit out their little take or narrative on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to, Disco and I knew because
Yeah,
this is a celebration day. So we're going to jump around all over the place because there's so much to think about and look at. But I want to change. I want to show everybody, and a lot of people probably do this, but Disco, I want for any new folks,
yeah.
I want to do a whole frame shift on people. So we know the cryptocurrency market cap. Oh, we're back at 3.2 trillion for all of cryptocurrency. We're at 3.2 trillion. Bitcoin, while we've been talking, just went. It was at 93 earlier this morning, but it just went to 93, which is right near its all-time high again. Ethereum's at 32. So Ethereum, even though it's up 24% in the last 7 days, equal to Bitcoin, you and I both know that the run in the last year has been nothing but down only. So I want people to realize, like, look at the last 7 days. I'm just gonna scroll, and for those listening, I'll explain. But I'm the number one cryptocurrency in the world is Bitcoin, valued at $1.8 trillion, which is just crazy to think about. But as I scroll down, Ethereum's number 2 at 400 million. So like not even a quarter of Bitcoin. Then like
Yeah, where's the flipping?
yeah, and then Solana is a quarter of that. You got Tether, which is a USD coin. Dogecoin, because obviously of Elon and Vivek, is going nuts at 59 billion. I'm not going to go through them all, but I'm just going to scroll. Look at the 7-day. Every single one of them, except for I think Cardano. There's a couple, but every single one is up double digits in the last week. So Uniswap's down, but I mean, everything is up. I'm at coin 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. I'm at coin 100. Look at this. The top 99 cryptocurrency coins have a value of 1 billion or more. All of them, but call it 4 or 5, are down for the week. So as smart as we all think we are, all of crypto is absolutely ripping as well. I'm not suggesting go deep there. I would strongly suggest for anyone new, just go into Bitcoin, ETH, or no, I would say the order now, just go for probably both of us is Bitcoin and then have some Solana bags because we don't use the chain a ton, but it is a heavily used chain and its adoption curve is strong and on a good trajectory. ETH is a great number 3, but ETH right now, their product market fit and what's going on, I would argue is in a little murky area now. They're going through some struggles. They're up like everybody else, but they're not up quite as much as most coins. Even a lot of shit coins are ripping faster than Ethereum. It'll be fine, but product market fit right now is not great. So I'm going to let you interject for a second. I'm going to do something and then I'm going to walk you through the same chart. How I just walk through it is how you should not be looking at cryptocurrencies. You're looking at it wrong. And I'll tell you why. So Disco, I want to get your thoughts there. I'm going to go back here to just our main happy chat screen. And I'm going to change something on this graph. And I want to see if you know what it is.
Okay. Now I'm on edge. I'm waiting for the reveal. I hope I'm up to the task. But yeah, everyone feels like a genius. Everyone feels like, whatever they have is the right bag, and that's a good feeling. And like go for it and enjoy it. But what is this reveal?
All right. So same chart. I'm looking at CoinGecko. That's where you can see all the coin values. So Bitcoin is still number 1. Ethereum still number 2. What do you notice it's different? What do you see a lot more of on that?
A lot of red, a lot of rojo.
Why now? So everything is red. Bitcoin is flat. So what I did was I'm not denominating everything in US dollars. I'm
There he
denominating
is.
this entire chart in Bitcoin. So if you are getting into adoption, especially as you're analyzing shitcoins and ETH, Solana, whatever's not Bitcoin, think of Bitcoin as your base layer zero. This whole thing is denominated Bitcoin, so that we know the market cap of all cryptocurrencies right now is $3.2 trillion. It is over everything but NVIDIA and gold as an asset. Now, I mean, 3.2 trillion, that's over, I believe, Apple, Microsoft. Bitcoin itself is 1.8 trillion. It's got a couple rungs to go to beat the big fangs, the Apple, the Microsoft, the NVIDIA, and there's one more. I'll go over that chart in a second. So as you scroll down, or as you think of any assets, especially as you get into crypto, look at it always compared to Bitcoin. And you notice a lot of these are down. Now, Doge, yeah, it's down today, but Doge is up over Bitcoin, which has ripped 66%. Obviously, that's your way higher risk play. I think Disco and I both considered a bag of Doge, but like, Elon is having to Doge, so it's Vivek, this new, and they even, I think their committee is even called like the Doge committee. Like, obviously that was no mistake. So, will Doge keep ripping, or is that going to go down? I don't know. Let's look at all time. Let's look at Doge overall max versus Bitcoin. So this is versus Bitcoin. It went way up when it first kind of hit hot in 21, and now it's gone way down. But just recently, since the election, obviously, it has had a huge spike up. So again, good information. If you look at it versus the US dollar, you're like, I'm buying that. I'm buying everything. But you have to ask yourself, if you're going to have crypto and it's not going to be Bitcoin, give yourself a good reason and compare it to Bitcoin.
So that's extremely helpful, because I've been looking at, and I want to ask you this, I don't know if it flows perfectly with this or not, but we're talking about the up only side of it in terms of, the US dollar side, which was, I love the delineation, but I hate to bring this up, but I will. The only thing that I see that hasn't really ripped or done well is runes. And I'm trying to see if that's is that because of Bitcoin going up so much? Like, I that's the part that I'm having trouble kind of understanding. It's like you would think there'd be a correlation of up, but maybe Bitcoin's value is just going up so much that it's sidelining any activity on that.
Yeah, I mean, runes, obviously, which are a very elegant solution from Casey Rotomorph on Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, some of them are up. I think Billy's even kind of down a little. My thoughts on runes right now, runes is a pure degen play. None of them have any utility at all. They have memeability, which obviously Solana and the meme coin with Pump Fun and all that stuff kind of invented that. But when Bitcoin is just ripping, do you think about it? Do you want to be like, Billy's going to rip faster? It might. Like, if any can, it's probably that one or Gizmo. But how long is Gizmo Imaginary Kitten going to last? Like, I don't want to spend too much time on runes, but I think when the underlying assets ripping, like, what's a great example? Like, would you buy if I mean, I guess put it in the real world, if the US dollar is just like, inflation is like negative, and your dollar, all of a sudden your buying power, like, it's really in a bad economy, a lot of people lose their jobs, all of a sudden you're like, my God, the cost of buying a car is going way down. But if that's happening really fast and your currency is getting more and more valuable by the day, where you literally notice it, are you going to buy a car that day?
No.
You're going to wait. You're going to wait until it settles to a new medium. That's why Bitcoin, like, once we've blown the lid off the roof, going over that 76,000 at 92. I mean, what's 92 over 76? That's at least 20% in the last week, right? Like, until we hit a new plateau and crab there a while. Crabbing is just another word for going sideways and kind of like, daily fluctuations, but you're finding your new your new flat ground to put your tent on. So you and I have talked a lot about this. Whoever we had on the show last week, we talked about that super cycle. Like, it was Isabel, who we haven't even released that one yet, but we talk about is demand going to get so high with the elections and with all these states pensions and everybody adopting it? Is it going to go up so much so fast and the demand is so high that it's in price discovery? It's not the typical cycles where every 4 years you get like that 8 months of just like way up high. This one could be price discovery. Who knows how long it'll take? Maybe it only will be this cycle, but everybody jumps in at once. I suspect it's going to be over cycles, but I think Bitcoin, like this prediction of this cycle is like from the 150 range to the 350 range, 350,000 per Bitcoin. And I feel like, that's a pretty wide range, but I think I'm with you. I don't honestly, when adoption goes crazy, I don't think you can even, how do you even, you can't measure it.
Well, you can't model it on the past. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Like us being now in this post all-time high discovery era right now, everything from before, like, yeah, you can look at the historicals, but it was like after the halving, it's like, oh, well, maybe this one played out. Actually, I may be way wrong on this, but it was like, oh, it's usually X amount of months after a halving until you start hitting this or that. So maybe that is coming to fruition a little bit if we kind of look at the dates and look at the numbers there. But right. I just think there's a different reality in terms of the overall tales of adoption that are not like, oh, more people are, because I've always been wondering, like, where are the retailers asking me like, hey, I want to learn more about it. And a lot of what we do at the show was to kind of, create a bridge for people to kind of go through the catalog and get, kind of educated and versed up on it. But again, it just seems like the whole stakes have changed, especially with, a pro crypto and pro Bitcoin administration and legislation like that. I don't think you can, that's got to be a cycle factor that hasn't ever been in play before. And, that's pretty seismic.
Yeah. I mean, that one is just huge. Let's pull the picture up. There it is. It's seismic. Like I think having us all be on these front lines of seeing the election, I think, like I said, I grew up in a Democratic family, and just seeing how people are reacting to it. And I hear them, I understand, but we also knew that if Trump did win, it was so pro Bitcoin that the roof was going to blow off. And a lot of the mainstream folks who haven't gotten to Bitcoin or did and got burned back when you did in 21, and then they left, I don't think, you and I talk about this all the time. Are they back in now at all-time highs, or are they coming back in when it hits 100K? I mean, now it doesn't matter because they may be one and the same, but I think they're maybe some of those folks who never fully left but never fully invested, they're the first ones back. But I think mainstream media is still reeling from the election, whereas we were all primed. Like even after Trump won, I was like, in Bitcoin was super high in the 70s. I'm like, I think I want to nibble a little more because like I don't see this now the global reserve currency, even if it takes another 20, 30 years, it feels like it's pretty inevitable at some point. And in the next 4 years are going to be pretty positive and pro Bitcoin. So I put my money accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, Lummis said yesterday that, she anticipates the reserve strategy to be approved in the first 100 days. And, F your historical data, because you haven't had, that sort of be part of legislation and part of literal strategy for, one of the biggest forces in the world. So those sort of, that doesn't just tip the scale, it changes the scale. And it makes, I think what you're getting at, and I think what we've seen happen is that with this recent move, what has happened that I hadn't seen before, experienced before, is a complete legitimization of it as a future asset class. There's like the questions of if it's going to go away or get shut down or go like that. Those assumptions have all changed now because it has become embroiled into the fabric of, finance now. People are looking at it as, hey, I want to have exposure to this. And I think that there's a handful of people that will always feel like they missed their chance because they knew some people that got in earlier than them and they didn't do it. And they saw them kind of moon and do well with it. But everybody still obviously has time to get in on this, is my point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just pulled up the Cynthia Lummis page. Yeah, I mean, the Bitcoin Act in the first 100 days of the Trump administration, and we have 65 days left until he gets in office. But I mean, look at this on CNBC on mainstream news. I never even noticed the title is so dumb. This is 2 days ago, Disco, and you'll see. I'm actually going to play the video. It's only a 1-minute clip, but it's CNBC, and it says the wealthy's view on Trump win. Like, what a funny way to fucking say this.
Trump's victory. Now let's find out what wealthy investors think with Barbara Goodstein, managing partner at R360, an ultra-wealthy community for centimillionaires. Barbara, good morning. Great to have you here. So last time you were here, you wore red. You said it was by accident. This time you said it was on purpose. So is that a sign of what these centimillionaires think about this election?
Well, that is a sign that Trump won the election, and we think that there is a lot of big news coming. We had our market opportunities and risks meeting last week, and there's a lot of upside from this win.
All right, so these investors are excited about the win and obviously what it means going forward. One thing you say they're excited about is Bitcoin. So I mentioned to one of our earlier guests that BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, it now has more assets under management than their gold ETF. Of course, we know gold is a safe haven. I know a lot of your investors, they hold gold as well. What's their sentiment when it comes to Bitcoin? And are they doing it directly or through ETF?
We're very high on Bitcoin, and we've been talking about Bitcoin for the past few years. We recommend doing it directly because you don't pay taxes if you're doing it directly, so that's a big difference. But we think that Bitcoin could become the next strategic reserve asset. So the country now holds 232,000 Bitcoin. We think that Trump could bump that up to over 1 million.
Yeah, I mean, just there's 100 things to pick there, but again, that was CNBC, and apparently she is the representative for all wealthy, super gadrillionaires in the world. But basically, did you notice? It's almost like she is a part of media who is prepping. She said the word Bitcoin like 9 times, and it's like getting in people's psyche. So some people might just keep being annoyed because they think all the negatives of Bitcoin, like with the mining, not realizing that a lot of it is actually like, hydropower, like up in the big foundry miners up in New York, by the rivers and dams up there. So like, I don't think you can get any more bullish of that. And the funny thing is, Disco, that was Monday. Today's Wednesday. 2 days ago, and Bitcoin was at 82,301. Well, now it's at 92,301. It's $10,000 more dollars of Bitcoin, or probably 13 or 14% growth in the last 2 days. So at some point, the toothpaste tube is squeezing, but now I finally don't have to say that anymore. This is like the beginning. The steamroller just touched like that weird crimp on the end of your toothpaste tube, like the very beginning. The squeeze hasn't even happened yet.
I'm surprised you didn't refer to it as the Bitcoin or something. You know what I mean? Like you just start hearing, we noticed that, ironically enough, we noticed that, back in the spring when we were in DC for the eclipse, and it was like, when you would have the different politicians come by the convention or whatever it was, like you would hear them start parroting out the talking points, and it was a little awkward sometimes in the beginning because they were kind of just road testing kind of how they're going to present and how they're going to say these terms. So I almost expected her to be like, hey, well, we like the Bitcoin, and go that route. But
yeah,
it's funny. It's just fun to start seeing it all over the place. And you look at the mining side of it, and then you look at how much demand there is for AI, and no one really seems to complain about, mining on that side of things. And I think that, you look at some of these mining companies, and they're extremely well positioned with the administration and everything like that. So there's just so many different angles to look at and plays to potentially get involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess it's almost I don't want to say it's a recap show, but it's a show where we're going through all the same charts that we've been looking at to make our own decisions. And, I guess now at this point, like, it's so obvious, the adoption, that still it's happening, but now it's going to take, Microsoft is going to vote December 5th, I believe. So we got about 2 or 3 weeks left there, right? And they're going to vote activist for the board was to vote on if Bitcoin should just part of their $280 billion reserve of cash, like put 2 or 3 or 4% of that into Bitcoin. The board, again, we did a whole segment on this, and the board, who is very gray haired, and a lot of bankers on that board, a lot of Disney, a lot of traditional media folks voted no. I wonder, Disco, if that's going to change now. It seems to me like Trump victory with Elon and Vivek and JD Vance all being pro-crypto, very pro-crypto, that corporations, I mean, and remember, January 1, 2025, the rules, the accounting rules for corporations to hold Bitcoin are no longer a liability. They completely change. We're holding crypto on your balance sheet, or in your treasury, is not like a liability and a huge tax burden. Like, all the road has now been built. Now the ribbon cutting is just January 1, 2025 for that accounting to take effect. For them to vote no after the election and all this would be downright stupid, because Microsoft, if they were the first FANG to do it, would reap, because everybody has to get this approval, until they don't. The first mega whale to do that is going to they're going to make triple their money of what their revenues are for Microsoft Office products, or whoever gives first, Apple iPhones. They're going to double, triple the value of the company in a year, because once Microsoft does it, or Nvidia, or Apple, or Google, the other ones will be like, I told you so, and then all the young people will be like, the old people are stupid. Like, it's literally going to be pandemonium in those halls. I wish I could have a little video camera in each of them, but it's inevitable.
NFA, but I've never done Polymarket, but I'm looking at it and it's a 13% chance right now. And it's only gone up 1% over the last 7 days. So that may be the one.
Slow, dude. They're slow.
I know, but 13%, like, you've got to look at, that you have the Fink side of it, as a pretty large shareholder, and you have Fidelity as a pretty large shareholder. And, you have, I just think that with this wave of acceptance, like, I think that the odds at the very least should have gone up more than, 1%. That's I feel like that's not reflective of what really the opportunity could be.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what Polymarket is, it's you bet on certain outcomes of things. The elections were the big ones, but now, degen's going to degen. Will Microsoft shareholders vote for this Bitcoin investment for their treasury? Yeah. And it's 13%, which I believe, Disco, we talked about the NFL last week. I believe that is the same percentage chance that the Detroit Lions have to win the Super Bowl. So I don't know. Do you put your money? The Lions looked vulnerable this time, but they had grit and they pulled it out. But this one, I guess the question becomes, can a FANG multi-trillion-dollar company juggernaut, bigger than most economies in the world, like Apple and Microsoft alone are probably, if they were countries, they'd be certainly top 15, probably top 10. Can they change, and can the board be swayed or sway themselves with the writing on the wall and what's happening fast enough for that vote in 2 or 3 weeks? So you think it's more than 13%, dude?
Yeah, that's my point. Like, like you look at parlays or, random things. It's not like you'd have to put a ton on there, but I just like the data is encouraging, and I have friends who own Microsoft that have texted me like, dude, I voted for Bitcoin. So I think there's a lot more people that are going to be able to now be comfortable voting for Bitcoin in light of what they're seeing being, kind of fed to them finally, that, it's not going to go away, and that it is resilient and continues to outperform people's expectations.
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't done a proxy vote in years. I always just throw them in the trash, or now you get them an email, I just delete them. I voted for this one. I was like, I voted. And the funny thing is, I didn't have to log in or anything. I'm like, how do you Maybe it's a link through the email, but I did vote yes with my 9 votes, whereas Microsoft has like 8 trillion votes to vote no. But I guess we'll wait and see. This is a fun one to think about and bet on. So,
yeah,
man, like,
Oof.
yeah, there's so many pieces to this. I want to give you some more, like, because we haven't done this in a while. Like, we did this for so long this year. Like, where's the adoption? What's happening on the exchanges? And there's a lot happening on the exchanges. I don't think I pulled this one up. This is just a capstone, but Bitcoin obviously has been climbing the ranks. At the beginning of last week, I believe it was still behind Meta. Maybe it had passed. Yeah, it was, but 1.4 trillion. So Bitcoin's now worth 1.8 trillion alone. Meta as a company is worth 1.4 trillion today. Silver is 1.7 trillion. Saudi Aramco, obviously the massive Saudi oil company, is worth 1.8 trillion. Bitcoin just passed it. So Bitcoin is now the 7th most valuable asset on the planet. Above it, which they're gonna, like, if it was 10 bowling pins, Meta gone, silver, only second to gold, gone, Saudi Aramco, biggest oil conglomerate in the world, gone. Now you've got Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple in that order, from 2.2 trillion Alphabet to 3.3 trillion Apple. You knock those off, like, to me that's almost like because, like, are you gonna take a base currency, or are you gonna take a company that's valuable with human beings and it's centralized? Like, it's such a no-brainer. And then you got Nvidia, which, right now it's the hot stock, it's the darling, it's at 3.6 trillion. Then it's smooth sailing, that gets Bitcoin. So Bitcoin goes from 1.8 to 3.6 disco. That's doubling now. So that would be Bitcoin at 180. Then it'd be worth 3.6 trillion. 180,000 per Bitcoin, that is, sorry. Then gold, the juggernaut, is worth 17.5 billion. So gold is literally a 5x number 2 Nvidia. Then Bitcoin would have a long way to go to get the gold. And to me, that's where you're like, as Michael Saylor says, like, as a store of value, it competes with gold. But think about this, like, housing prices are probably the things that have gone up the most in the U.S., especially in desirable communities, and they're trying to build fast enough for more people and more homes. But, like, Bitcoin, like, if you don't want to own right now, like, you could literally rent and store a home's worth of value in Bitcoin. And I would say in this super cycle, you're probably going to beat it, and you may beat it for the next 50, 100 years. And that might sound crazy to some people, but it doesn't seem unreasonable. So my point is, looking at gold is the be all end all to beat to get to 18 trillion. Then you've got mortgages. Then you've got the whole, like, reserve currency. Now you're talking in the hundreds of trillions. And, at some point, I'm sure a noob would be like, okay, like, you're on hopium. Maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah, I think that what's fascinating, you touched on this earlier, and I'd go back to it, and looking at that chart and then just doing the straight crypto market cap as opposed to Bitcoin, it's already then a top 5, if not, closer to the number 2, number 3. And we see that, with this shift that we've had in terms of the openness, it's not just towards Bitcoin. So we should see substantial upside from some other offerings and parts of the kind of overall ecosystem. So having crypto do that, you're almost going to have like a FANG within Bitcoin. It's just remarkable to kind of think of this whole power structure. And you look at FANG, that's all pretty much, Web 2. So I'm just saying, we're going to build this whole other side of it now with everything that's happening with kind of the fusion of, AI agents working and conducting and transacting with digital currencies. Like, dude, the roof is not high enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just scrolled down because you kind of triggered something. Ethereum, just so people know, is at 397 billion. That is number 28 right now, right behind Home Depot, which I think they could pass them easy. Costco, I'm a big Costco fan. I think Costco, with being such a staple for everything, could go way up. But here's a fun one, Disco. So Ethereum is 3 spots behind MasterCard, which is valued at $500 billion or 475 billion. So MasterCard's business is to give all of you pieces of plastic, and they take 3% every. It's got to be cashless now, guys. Money's dirty. Money can give you diseases and stuff, and MasterCard and Visa, they take a 3% cut. And those days, not to say that can't be an option, but it can't be the only option we're going to. And I think that's where it makes me really angry and broken, because a lot of people are, with inflation, a lot of people are struggling, even though they've been told like, no, everything's come back down after COVID. It's like, maybe, but COVID spiked prices so hard that coming down, the new normal is still insanely more, especially for eggs, especially for food, especially for gas, the things in your bucket that actually everybody uses every day.
Yeah. And aside from, the different takes on why things happened the way they did last Tuesday, that was probably the core motivating factor. Was you had one side of it assuming that people felt that the economy was going well, and you had other side hearing people complain that no, it's not going well, I'm still struggling. And that to me was kind of the crux of of what separated things. It was like, dude, you say everything's so great, you wouldn't change anything. I want something changed because I'm having a hard time when I get to the freaking checkout line. So that kind of deafness to that really was a huge impact on the fact that we're able to be in this position of having, a pro administration for one of the things we care a lot about. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So it's funny, like I said, Disco, we haven't looked at these in a while, but the amount of Bitcoin right now on exchanges. So this is the last year. The green is the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges, and it looks more drastic than it is. But like a year ago, we had like 2.7-ish million on exchanges. Now we only have 2.4. It was 2.3 yesterday. So maybe a lot of people are going in and taking big profits, but I honestly, I can't believe it's not under 1 million now. Like, why would anybody leave their stuff on the exchanges now when you have your private wallets and private keys? But to me, at some point, like, here's a little stat for you, and these are crazy. So I got to show this chart because this is just, that we're starting to get in a mind-blowing range. 1,444 Bitcoin every day go into these 7 ETFs. So obviously BlackRock's ETF, which is bigger than their gold ETF. Now it's the fastest growing ETF ever. They've got they're 28 billion under management now. Just BlackRock's ETF in Bitcoin. They have 28 $1 billion in Bitcoin. It's the fastest growing ETF of all time. It's just mind blowing. So they're all these guys every day. So like yesterday, 817 more million Bitcoin got bought. Disco on Monday, the 11th, 1.1 billion went in. Just mind-blowing numbers. So it averages out, since the ETFs came out earlier this year, to 1,444 Bitcoin a day. I went to Google to search because it's been a while, and I knew, I'm like, this doesn't look right. So I asked, how many Bitcoin are mined per block? And here's where you shouldn't be using Google anymore. Google literally is losing. People just don't realize it yet because all the other search engines are bad. But use like Venice. Use an AI chatbot that has more privacy controls, and they're not tracking, cookies in your browser like Google does and building this profile on you. According to Google, there's about 144 Bitcoin blocks a day, which is accurate. And there are 6.25 Bitcoins per block. So 144 times 6.25 Bitcoin is about 900 Bitcoin being mined a day. That's completely correct, for the exception that it's completely wrong. That was true before the halvening, before April. So it's like, who is even paying? Like, is there a human? This to me shows you how out of touch Apple, Google, and these maybe Microsoft would make this mistake, but they basically are doubling the amount of Bitcoin that's mined per block. No, it's 3.125 after the halving. The amount of new Bitcoin that enters the system got cut in half again, like it does every 4 years. And the fact that Google 7 months after the halving, there's not a human to check this AI that is saying 900 still when we know it's 450 roughly a day of Bitcoin being mined. Like, that's a fail. Only because I knew, I was like, man, that's not right. That was the last one that I knew to like go to other sources and check it. And so anyway, that's a side note fail, but it's a fail all the same.
It's a pretty significant indicator of, why some of those ones that are above it are not going to maintain being above it, and be as relevant and have the influence. I have one question for you. From a more veteran perspective, I'll say OG, like you were aware of things that I wasn't over the course of this run up, where it was like, oh dude, Germany's selling, or oh yeah dude, that's the old Mount Gox, and we've always been worried about the Mount Gox unloading. Are there any other kind of rabbits in the hat that you're aware of that may come to roost, or are we kind of clear of those, kind of the old, kind of scary, like, oh, what if if Mount Gox cleared all that or whatever? Like, are we kind of past that from a fear perspective?
I think so. I'm actually looking right now. I'm going to Arkham, which is a great site to show who's holding what. Like, that's how they're the ones who figured out Tesla didn't. Everyone's like, Tesla sold all their Bitcoin. No, they didn't. They just moved it to a different wallet, and that was Arkham who figured that out. So let's look how much Bitcoin is. So it looks like Mt. Gox is still holding 39,000 Bitcoin. So they were trying to distribute it, and you and I covered this at the beginning of the summer, that they had, like, in some cases, like 2 months, 6 weeks, 3 months, 4 months. But I think I had earmarked like October. I'm like, it'll all be done in October. A lot of it got put on hold. I don't remember what the original was. I think it was at like 80 or 120 thousand Bitcoin that they were holding. So right now they're still holding 3.5 billion. In the grand scheme of things, with the super cycle and the toothpaste squeeze starting, like, it because they have distributed some of it, just the 40, I think like a third of it didn't, and I can't remember why, but I'm not worried about it because that number has dwindled. No, I think now,
especially just going back on the daily inflows that are happening just from the ETF side of it. Like, it just seems like a lot of this can be offset just with the activity. And I guess that's all I was wondering. Like, is there something that I'm not in the loop on from back in the day that, could come up? But as I say, I just don't see it.
No, Mt. Gox was from 2014. That was before my time, but that was the big one, and that's been on for literally 10 years. That's been like, oh, once that goes, everyone's going to sell it and panic and stuff like that. But now, yeah, 3.5 billion's a lot, but now we're at what was it, a 1.8 trillion dollar valuation? Like 3.5 billion to 1.8 trillion. All of a sudden, now you're, what's the math on that? Like maybe 0.5% or something, or not, like, it's nothing. It's not that 3.5 billion is not a lot of money, but it's nothing.
Look at me, I'm doing like all-time high, shrugging things off, like, yeah, it's nothing, we're good. Like that. It's just a different way you're positioned in the seat when you can see this stuff from the kind of rizzy and swaggy perspective of breaking through.
Well, yeah, and everyone needs to do their homework. They need to be comfortable with it themselves, and they need to, you don't, in life, you don't have to do anything, and I wouldn't recommend going all in on anything without researching it. But I guess the one thing I would implore to any newer people or people on the fence, like, if you're not looking at Bitcoin seriously now, do, and at least get a basic understanding. Watch some old Andreas Antonopoulos videos, look up this is what I learned on the people. Most people haven't heard of these people, but like Trace Meyer had the 7 network effect of Bitcoin, how each one, as they lock into place, just, it's like an upward exponential spiral. Like, look into why people are so excited about it, and don't look at it as just like, oh, it's tulip mania, it's this, it's that. That there's a reason why people are into it and are then sticking around. And that's, I think, the most frustrating thing for all of our normie friends out there, and all the people who may have dabbled or never dabbled and never got into it and kind of believed everything they heard from mainstream media, like places like New York Times. Like, they were getting sold a lot of half-truths, and in many cases, in most cases, a lot of lies that like had been disproven for 5 or 6 years, and they're still peddling. Now with a new administration, it will be very interesting to see who's saying what. Will they double down even more? Like, you and I both know now that if you're a politician like Elizabeth Warren, like, she won. Like, we knew she was going to win. She's got Massachusetts locked. Like, she's got the name brand. She's been there for probably 20, 30 years, whatever. She didn't lose, but now she, like, do you really think she's going to have an anti-crypto coalition? If she does, she's literally going to be like, you know, an Onion article, like, old woman yells at, you know, squirrels or something. Like, what?
Well,
She's powerless.
Well,
No.
she did. Listen, she is now the top Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee. So
Okay.
she shifted into that. And there's theories that in 2 years, there could be a high probability that the Senate might flip Democrat, because that tends to happen after the incumbency. So that would, then she would still be sticking around as the committee head for the banking committee. So she could still, you know, so it's more of a, I think that that's the other point. Like, I think we talk about the first 100 days for a lot of this stuff. It's really a race for the first 2 years to try to get things in place that will be much harder to approve if there is, you know, more splitting within the Senate and the House and stuff like that. So there's the first 100 days, but then there's really, you know, kind of the first 2 years to put a lot of things in place like that. So I think that we may, we'll probably see her again, you know, talking about how scary and devilish it is. But I agree, she'll be muted and her hands will be tied. But, you know, don't call it a comeback. Like, she's sticking around.
Yeah, and that, you know, that's a good point. Like, and that's part of this euphoria that we're all in. Like, that's a good data point, and that means maybe I'm stepping over my skis a little. Like, in this whole election thing, did she like just get this in the last week, or no? That was like in the last couple months she had that.
I don't know.
That's a big difference, you know?
Yeah, I think it's been in the last couple, like last week, like that she positioned herself to be that, and really, because the guy who was in charge of, remember this, the guy who was in charge of the banking committee was the Ohio senator that lost to the really pro crypto guy, Bernie Moreno. So there was a big flip there. So she, just know that she's lifelong and cagey, and, you know, is going to try to position herself as best she can to keep her voice being heard.
Well, this is interesting, Disco, because like, if you kind of read between the lines, like, remember when she did the whole anti-crypto army thing, her support has certainly waned in her party, and obviously the younger people aren't going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, because the one thing we've learned from this election is if you go anti-crypto, you're not putting more people in your camp to vote for you, but you're certainly alienating the people who are heavily into it. But I find it very interesting that her chief of staff, remember, he had the public speech that he said, and I worked with the banking industry to create these new crypto regulations. I worked with the banking industry. Remember, Elizabeth Warren was against the banking industry 20 years ago when I think I voted for her in a primary at one point. I really liked her because she saw the banks for what they were, and now it appears to be clearly bought by the banks. So I would be interested to see, like, obviously, it feels like when Obama first got in office, it was all Democratic. They could have passed anything, and they all fought for 2 years. They ended up they did pass a version of Obamacare, but now it hasn't been updated, and there's things about Obamacare that are okay, and there's things that completely don't work, and it needed tweaks after that. I will be curious if it'll be really interesting, because to me, if she just got voted in there, either the banking industry, their lobby got her in, and they're like, all right, we're going to bide our time and fight, and she's going to be here. Or at some point, the Democratic Party is going to be like, no, she, I don't know who has more power, the lobby, the banking lobby, or the other senators and Congress people. I have a feeling I just answered my own question. It probably is the bankers in the lobby, the people who hold the money. But this will be really interesting to see. Can she really hold relevance in that power for 2 years? You're right. She might be a sleeping thorn, and then they get the Senate, the Democrats get the Senate, and then we're back to like gridlock square one. But it just seems 2 years from now, especially if a lot of people start getting into crypto, make money, that like everyone's going to be like, well, what are you doing? Like regulate it with clear guidelines. Don't make everyone out to be criminals, because they're not. And go after the scammers, because there's tons in this space. Like, do your job.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up in the course of, at some point in this show today, but I'm also looking at some of this with a somewhat leery eye of, there's a lot going on with Coinbase right now. And,
Okay.
Coinbase, basically, if you look at the big winners and you look at, who made the most, like Brian Armstrong, his wealth went up like 2 billion since the election. Coinbase stock's been up like, 45% over the past, 5 days. And, they're really good at positioning, this is a big win for crypto and for the space. And, I guess I applaud the Stand with Crypto movement in, what they did with that. But I'm just starting to be a little concerned about, are we letting, incentivized companies dictate policies that will ultimately benefit them under the guise of, hey, we're fighting for crypto overall. So it's kind of a loaded thought that I'm going through, but just because they were able to use the money and lobby, like, are we creating a pathway for a Coinbase to simply become the next generation of a dominant bank? And is that really what everybody in the space wants to have happen and is signed off on? Or have they just kind of grabbed that mantle and been very effective in positioning the future and talking about policies that are pro crypto, but ultimately policies that are probably going to be pretty pro, their bottom line and their expansion plans moving forward? So I just think that there's things to look at within Coinbase. I know that they launched the Coin 50 recently, which is essentially their version of the S&P 500 for, crypto. So I just don't know how much influence, when we came into this and loved this for, as we talked about to kick off the show, the beauty of the freedom to transact and the self-sovereignty and all that stuff, like, how does this Coinbase, kind of paving the way that they want, kind of, putting the roads in place for their success moving forward? Is that something to be wary of? Or do we just say that's how business is going and they won and they're in there? So as much as Bitcoin won and as much as crypto won, I'm a little concerned about how Coinbase pretty much got to just, go through the red zone without that much resistance.
Yeah, I mean, look at the chart for the last year. It's gone up and down, and obviously it's spiked hard. And they custody of the 10 or 12 ETFs, whatever it is. They custody, I think, 8 or 9 of them. So a majority of them they custody. So they have their hands in a lot of places. They definitely, to Brian's credit, always tried to take the high road. And, obviously they weren't FTX. They weren't a total mess. Kraken stays way more behind the scenes. I would argue Kraken does just as good of a job, but they were never as visible as Coinbase. If you rewind all the way to the beginning, Coinbase, from the time it went public IPO, people don't realize this, it's still down. Like that first day it started, I don't remember, it was like 290, maybe 290 actually is the number now that I think about it. I thought it was a little higher than that, but I and so many people believed in Coinbase back in the day when it went public, like 4, 5, 6 years ago, whatever it was. And basically they did this weird, it wasn't a Dutch auction, but they literally all the management just like, whereas Google, I don't remember, or Facebook, like, yeah, they may have crabbed a little, but then they went up fast, especially Google. I don't know if you remember Google. Google literally had such a good roadmap right when they went public and after the quiet period. It just went up and it never stopped. And Coinbase, literally, that first dump doesn't look big now, but it was terrible. Then it went up to where it was, even a little higher. And then it went way down into like the, started at 290. And I never sold. It was at $30, 40, 50 in the 2023 range to 70. And finally this year again, when all the ETFs came out, it went in the 200s again. And now it's spiking back up to its original 290 like 4 or 5 years ago. So my return disco on Coinbase thus far in 5 years of holding has been 0. I'm literally even today. So thanks for bringing that up, because I haven't checked and I never remembered what the original was. So kind of shame on them for dumping their bags on retail. Like, I basically ate their profits and bought their mansions for them as it went down.
Right.
So I have no super love, but beyond that, they have taken a more conservative approach. They always tried to work with Gensler and them until finally Gensler just Wells noticed everybody. And they were like, okay, we're like with everyone else, they're fighting, but you're right. We're not going to be aligned with them forever. That's why you graduate from learning about crypto, getting into crypto, buying a little, to self-custody, where Coinbase has nothing to do with the self-sovereignty of you holding your own Bitcoin on your own private keys.
So I was looking, and I don't know if we can pull it up, but I was looking at the Coinbase 50 index and how it's broken out. And they have like a roadmap of it that shows the percent breakdowns and stuff like that. And I have half a thought that may be not the worst thing to point people towards if they're talking about dollar cost averaging in on stuff.
Okay, so I'm at this page. Is this going to get me the Coinbase 50? So number of contracts 50, circulating market cap. Okay, here we go. Okay, cool. So Bitcoin. So this is an index of a bunch of cryptocurrencies called the Coinbase 50. And it's got Bitcoin at exactly 50% of the holdings. Very apropos. You got Ethereum at 28.8% today. You got Solana at 6, Ripple at 3, Dogecoin at 1.4, and then there's an additional 45 assets, to get to the 50 assets for 10.4%. So that's your high risk long tail. And you're saying, I kind of like the idea.
Well, what's kind of cool about it, and I don't know if you can get to this marketvector.com/coin50, but that's what I was looking at. And it's really kind of badass in a weird way, because you have the, weights, accordingly weights for Bitcoin and Solana and everything, but they're talking about their performance and they're like, what the sector that really helped us was the meme coin category. So it's like, you almost have a way to be like, you're covered off on all different sides of it. That's what I found interesting.
Yeah, and it's got Bitcoin at 50%. So wait, what's it called? I'm at the site. It's
marketvector.com/coin50.
Okay, I'm just going to type in coin 50 because it's not showing up. Okay, hold on one sec. Coin 50. And 50 is the letters 50, right?
Correct.
Okay, coin. Okay. I got the slash in the wrong place. Coin 50. Here we go. Coin 50 index dashboard. Okay, cool. So I've got it here. Coin 50. So I see meme coins. They're saying they're up 11%. Store of value. Okay, so bonks, and they're interesting. Hedera heads. Okay.
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
because we talk about how it's hard to stay on top of all angles of it, but if this does that for you, it may be a decent onboard for, when we're talking about where do you point normies. It's like, well, dude, you could dollar cost into this and have exposure across a lot of different avenues.
Yeah, I think this would be the second thing I would tell them to do. Maybe like Bitcoin would be first, like get some Bitcoin, learn about it, learn how to self-custody. Just go down that rabbit hole. Just start with one thing, one aspect that's interesting to you. This is interesting though, because you're right. Like, it's not like you and I with Bonk and all these meme coins. We just like, we didn't have time to keep track of them. But if Coinbase has a trader who can keep track of all this stuff, then that seems like a win. It's certainly, like, let's say you have a little retirement account for like 100 grand or something, and you make 10 bets. This certainly would be one of them, like a little Coinbase 50 ETF. So yeah, it's interesting. You're kind of given the nuance of Coinbase. Are we aligned? Are we not? But to me, I love that you bring up like some negatives, and then you're like, this is a cool product, because it does look like a cool product.
What I think it would do, if you look at like, go down a little bit,
okay,
please, up a little bit. Sorry, from there, up a little there. See just where it says like, the top 5 tokens by daily return or whatever. Like, it's like you don't really have to have FOMO on Doge because you have exposure to it. So I think that's where I'm like, that might be kind of a low maintenance play to have broad exposure. And I'm sure it's getting, AI and algorithmic up and, managed that way. But I don't know. It's just something I wanted to point out that I found some interest in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing this up. This is cool. And I'm going to take a look at it. I almost feel like with Trump winning and Elon like right next to him, whether he gets a cabinet position or not, whether he has time to have a cabinet position or is just an unofficial advisor or something, like with Elon and Vivek talking about Doge and having the name of these consortiums to fix stuff, having the name Doge in it, like, it could certainly go down, but it doesn't seem like it will anytime soon. Right. So, but you're right. This one, like Hedera, I haven't heard of Hedera in years. I looked into it. Hedera hash graph. I think it's like a quantum resistant one. As I recall, I remember being kind of interested in it. I used to study all these different coins, and now like I want to spend more time with the family. I want to do more activity, and I'm mostly Bitcoin. So for me, it's just not worth the time. So this is a perfect solution. So good find, Disco. Thank you.
Sure. So we'll keep an eye on that stuff, on that side of it as well. But, where are we at now? Is it up again? Yes. I mean, it's just remarkable what's going on just in real time with the.
Is it up again? And just so people want to know, if they do want to do this in Bitcoin, you have to go down to this BTC converter, and you have to go from BTC to the US dollar and back and forth. So Bitcoin's back at, okay, so it's only at 90 right now. So it's cooling down a little from all-time highs earlier today, but I don't know. And maybe it'll go down in the 80s again, or maybe in the 70s, but are we worried? We're just in price discovery.
Yeah. And you know what we're seeing, or in the last couple of days, what's been really fun is that you're seeing like these huge inflows in like the first 20 to 30 minutes of trading. So that's like the stuff coming into the ETF. So you see like when the market opens, you see like a kick up generally of when it starts to approach the all-time highs. So it's a weird correlation to the stock market, but it's also representing what I've always wanted, which was the decoupling. It's like, it's not just contingent, like, oh, the NASDAQ's up, that means Bitcoin's up. Like they're getting some distance in terms of the activity and the price movement, which is what we've kind of always wanted, and does really kind of represent the maturation of it as its own asset.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because the market is actually it's just up a little today. MicroStrategy's way down. Marathon's up. Wow, everything in the last 10 minutes must have just literally tanked. I don't know what news came out today. Marathon's down 13%. Coinbase is down 10%. I swear I checked 10 minutes ago and it was like up, but yeah, it's fascinating. But ARK is still at 90, so it's kind of flat to yesterday, or up just a little. It's all going to move around so much. There must have been some news or CPI or something must have just come out, because these swings are just wild.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to, I mean, from the stock market side of it, you're definitely going to have bears start popping up and saying this rally is not sustainable and blah, 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 blah. You're going to start hearing that like every once in a while. They're going to get a day or two in where they're going to get some traction.
Yeah, and seeing it down right there, like I see all the red and immediately like going from FOMO to FUD brain, and who knows? Maybe it will go back down the 70s, or maybe it'll settle in a new place in the mid 80s for a while until the demand catches up. But I never even finished this thing. So 1,400, just the ETFs, not the sovereigns, not the states, nothing, just the ETFs get 1,444 Bitcoin a day. The total supply of Bitcoin a day is 450 right now. So that's 320% more demand than the daily supply of new Bitcoin. Now, obviously, there's plenty of Bitcoin out there to get, but at some point, someone's going to want to hold on to those. And the more paper hands go to diamond hands, the more that supply will go down and the more the demand will go up. So to me, it just seems like one more piece of inevitability. So it's like, I feel like there's 20 more charts we could cover, but Disco, maybe this is a good, it's probably as good a place as any to stop. I don't know. Is there anything else that's big on your mind?
No, I feel like this was good to record, this moment in time. And I think that, it's remarkable to think how things have changed in the last 7 days, the last 14 days, the last 7 months. So we're just consider me completely riveted as to how this all plays out. And I can view it with a more comfortable seat than I used to view it from. And I'm going to be grateful for that ability. And that happened, recently. So it kind of helps to change kind of your perspective and your tenor. Like you don't feel,
right,
as desperate or scared. Like you can operate from a position of comfort.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing to say.
Absolutely. So, all right, everybody. Well, that's our show this week. Not financial advice, never was. Entertainment purposes only. This show is not financial advice at all, because a lot of ideas were thrown out today. But again, the show's purely for entertainment. But we love having you here. We are independent media, so do support us. You can listen to us in the car and Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Certainly watch us on YouTube, and stay tuned for some other platforms. But X is the main platform that we're still on right now. But as Disco and I go on, this show is probably going to be more broad strokes and less in the weeds, and two friends talking about politics, Bitcoin, society, and just how all these things are meshing together, and what the new Overton window shifts to, and what the new normal is. And some weeks are more fun than others. This one's just like, holy crap, what just happened? But we'll continue to do this, and we love it. So with that,
thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Where's the end button, dude? Like it's a perfect segue to a show. And there it is. Text is too small. Bye, everybody.